So we'd like to start out by asking each candidate to introduce themselves and talk about why they're running to be Pennsylvania's next Attorney General. And we will start with Mr. Sunday.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So it's an honor to be here with you. My name is Dave Sunday. I'm the District Attorney in York County, and I'm running for Attorney General. So I grew up. I grew up here in central Pennsylvania, and at the age of 18, I went and joined the Navy right out of high school. I was enlisted, so I swabbed decks and I chipped paint. I was deployed all throughout the world. I was in the Persian Gulf for Desert Strike, and I also served in Central and South America doing counter-drug operations. I came home from my deployment after 4 years of active duty, and I started working at UPS. And so my path to be on this stage is a little different than a lot of my friends and colleagues, but I'm very proud of it. So I started working at UPS. I did my undergraduate work during the day, and I worked at UPS at night. And then I worked at UPS during the day, and I went to law school at night. And so those 12 years of being an enlisted guy, plus those 8 years of working at UPS through college and law school were really just a tremendous blessing in my life. It laid the foundation for who I became as a leader, for the foundation who I became as an elected district attorney. And at the end of law school, I met my wife, and my wife and I have a son now. He's in third grade, he's 9. Today was supposed to be his first soccer game, but he was up with a fever all night, so that's not happening. After law school, I ended up clerking for a judge in York County, and then I went right into the DA's office. Next year will be my 17th year in York County. I have served as a prosecutor in York County for 16 of those years. I've been a federal prosecutor as I was a special assistant United States attorney, where we prosecuted large gang cases from the city of York. Many of you know York is directly north of Baltimore, and that puts certain challenges upon us. To that point, I also was chief of litigation, ran our major crimes unit, longtime jury trial prosecutor, and I went on to become the elected district attorney. So I served as the elected DA, and I served in that capacity all through COVID and everything that came with that. I was reelected as DA, and I'm going to tell you right now, I'm running for Attorney General because if our communities are not safe, then nothing else matters. It is the absolute most important part of what we do. And if we do not have safe families and a safe environment for our children, then no matter what else we do as a society, it absolutely won't matter. I have fought this battle for my career in a courtroom. I've fought fentanyl, I have fought gangs, and I have done everything I can to bring my philosophy of accountability and redemption to the district attorney's office. As a result of that, crime has decreased by 30% since I took office, and it's just wonderful to be here.
Thank you very much. State Representative Williams, if you want to tell the crowd a little bit about yourself.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me here today. As was just said, I am state representative from the Delaware County, Chester County area. My district is about geographically split between the two. Unlike Dave, I'm not originally from here. I'm from Alaska, and that comes to play in my story in just a moment. I went from Alaska to Duke University on a Navy ROTC scholarship, and then was commissioned in the Marine Corps. While I was at the basic school, I got selected for flight training, went to Pensacola and ended up in the F-18, where I served a combat tour in Desert Storm, flew 56 combat missions. When I came back to Pensacola as a flight instructor, I was selected for the Marine Corps Law Education Program, went to the University of Florida, where I was trained to become not only a lawyer, but then later a judge advocate. I was the chief prosecutor of Camp Pendleton in California, the biggest base in the Marine Corps. I left active duty in 2000 and went to Columbia Law School to get a master's in legal philosophy and criminal law. I smile because that's a passion of mine that I don't think I'll ever be able to monetize. Legal philosophy is just something you do and you are. It was when I was in Columbia that I got a judicial clerkship with the 11th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals in Atlanta, the chief judge. About halfway through that clerkship, Chief Judge Edmondson comes into my office and he says something that changed my life. He said, "You've been a nomad your whole life, being a Marine Corps officer. It's time for you to settle down, get married, have some children, and run for office." And I was like, okay. He's like, well, I say that because you have 3 job offers from Washington, D.C. Nobody's from there. They go there from somewhere else. So sure enough, I changed my path, went from Washington to Denver, Colorado, where I was in the U.S. Attorney's Office as a federal prosecutor doing gun violence, violent gang crime, and illegal immigration, and fell in love with a Philadelphia girl. And as Paul Harvey used to say, now you know the rest of the story why I'm a Pennsylvanian. I then took orders back to active duty in the Marine Corps to be deputy legal counsel to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, where I did ethics and detainee litigation in federal court. Then ended up in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Philadelphia, ran for Congress in 2008, which was another life change, because that 2008 election is where I pitched over into Pennsylvania's energy sector, talking about the fact that I understand exploration of our natural resources, being from Alaska, being the lead surrogate in Pennsylvania for McCain-Palin, running in 2008. And then I spent the next 10 years doing energy law before I ran for the Pennsylvania House in 2020, in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of President Trump's run that year. And I ran in Delaware County, where Republicans were losing, and I won by 600 votes. I ran again in 2022 for re-election in an area where fewer Republicans were winning, and I won again by 1,500 votes. And that's part of why I answered the question about running for Attorney General in this way. I'm tired of losing. I'm sick and tired of losing as a Republican Party. I'm also sick and tired of living next door to a place like Philadelphia, where crime is out of control. And where crime is out of control in Philadelphia for one reason, and it's not just Philadelphia, it's all of the major cities of the Commonwealth. One reason: lack of prosecution. And what I'm bringing to the table is a bona fide, bad to the bone, law and order message about prosecuting in these large cities, and that's why I'm running for Attorney General.
Gentlemen, let's talk about the office, the office of the Attorney General. In Pennsylvania, we've seen different attorneys general approach the job differently, some as strict constructionists enforcing the law, some clearly activists pursuing an agenda. How would you approach the role of Attorney General? Let's stay with you, Mr. Williams.
Yes, that's a great question. It's important to understand that the Office of the Attorney General is not just about prosecuting crime. That's 1/4 of the office. There are 4 offices in the Attorney General's office: criminal, civil, public protection, and public engagement. So we've talked a little bit at the outset about the necessity to have an aggressive prosecutor in the Attorney General's job. But equally important is somebody who can go into that job in day one and in the civil division defend the Constitution of Pennsylvania against attacks from the other side. And what do I mean by that? The governor has already entered into an executive order binding Pennsylvania into the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, RGGI. That's unconstitutional. Now, who in our government is going to take this governor to task in the Commonwealth Court and then the Pennsylvania Supreme Court? It's the Attorney General through the civil division of that office. That's number one. Number two, the Office of Public Protection. I have litigated with and against the Office of Consumer Advocate. I've been involved with the Office of Consumer Protection relative to fraud and protecting consumers. I sit right now on the Consumer Protection Committee in the House of Representatives, and I'm the subcommittee chair of the Utilities Subcommittee. I understand consumer protection. To answer your question very directly, the Attorney General's office has a role in crime, they have a role in protecting the Constitution, and they have a role immediately in tilting with this governor against his unconstitutional behavior.
Mr. Sunday, your thoughts on the role of Attorney General?
Sure, absolutely. Clearly, the Attorney General is the chief law enforcement officer for the Commonwealth. And again, I go back to the principle that if we are not safe, nothing else matters. Turning to the role of the Attorney General with regard to consumer advocacy. In Pennsylvania, we have the 3rd highest percentage of senior citizens that live in our state. And I can tell you right now that those senior citizens deserve our protection. They deserve our advocacy, because I'm going to tell you what, God willing, we all get to be that age someday. We're not going to want someone to take what we have. And so as a prosecutor, I experienced a case very personally where there was an older gentleman, he had dementia. And someone came to his house to a contractor came to his house to do something. And the gentleman wrote him a check. And the contractor came back the next day. And the gentleman wrote him a second check. And the contractor came back a third, a fourth, a fifth, a sixth day. And this gentleman kept writing him checks for the exact same work that was done. And because he had dementia, this guy thought he was going to get away with it. And so we identified it. I took it to a jury trial, and he was prosecuted and convicted at a jury trial, and he was sent to prison. It is absolutely critical, with the resources that the Attorney General's office has, that we focus it on the things that make our communities safer and better. And I think that when you view the Attorney General's office, obviously we can talk about the crime side till the end of days. And to me, that is the most important reason why I'm running for Attorney General for public safety. But at the same time, as a consumer advocate, we must advocate for the people that are the weakest amongst us, the people that have no one to protect them, the people that need someone to stand up for them. And I think right off the bat of the senior citizens in Pennsylvania that need a prosecutor's mentality to go in there and keep them safe. And in addition to that, I think of the role with regard to children. As the elected district attorney, I have increased in my office. Actually, we created from scratch an entire computer forensic team that does nothing but fight to identify people that are trafficking child pornography. And through that, we've been able to identify not just the people that are doing that and prosecute them to help children, but we have also collaborated with the community to identify victims of human trafficking. And human trafficking is one of the most just repulsive, disgusting crimes that's occurring in our community right now. And so you have the criminal side that we can go into, and I'd love to talk about. And on the other side of it, with advocacy, we must use our resources to advocate for the people that need our help and protection.
So let's talk a little more about crime and this surge of criminal activity our communities are experiencing has already come up, but it's worth digging into deeper. One of the key roles of the Attorney General is combating crime, but how do you do it? What are the reasons for the criminal activity? How can you, as Attorney General, from your statewide post, best combat the surge in crime? We'll start with you, Mr. Williams.
Yeah, so I've actually been working on this in the context of the House of Representatives. It is indisputable that the overwhelming amount of violent crime is committed by a prior convicted felon. And as a consequence of that, what I've been doing from the House of Representatives is targeting prior convicted felons found in possession of guns and trying to take those cases federally. And the reason for that is a federal prosecution of a prior convicted felon in possession of a gun carries with it a substantial federal sentence, and there's no parole in the federal system. So as a consequence of that, I got $1.5 million in the state budget the first year I was in the House, and then $3 million per year since then to increase the number of assistant district attorneys in Philadelphia and Delaware County, in my region, to take those cases federal. Get them out of the hands of Larry Krasner, the district attorney of Philadelphia, who's not prosecuting those crimes. Get him out of his hands and take them into federal court where we can get severe sentences and get those people off the street. That's number one, public safety, and number two, deterrence. You send a message to the streets of Philadelphia that we're coming and we're serious. That's number one. Number two, and from the Attorney General's point of view, if the District Attorney of Philadelphia is not going to prosecute crime, I will. I will be there with Assistant Attorney Generals and agents, and we will find those felons in possession of guns, and we'll take them into federal court with the coordination of the U.S. Attorney's Office. That's violent crime. But then there's a secondary part, too, which is we've got to start doing something about addiction. Because addiction is feeding the criminal element. It is feeding the need for criminality. I lost my brother in 2020 to an overdose. And I want to tell you this very brief story, because it is another one of those moments where if you're paying attention, it will change your life. It changed mine. I was in the county jail visiting. The county jail where I live is in my legislative district. And I was visiting with men who were undergoing drug treatment. And after about an hour, I asked this question of the group. It's like, do you guys remember the first day you decided to start using drugs? Because I was genuinely curious if they remember that moment. And this guy who hadn't said a word to me the entire time said, man, you got this all wrong. I said, what do I have wrong? He said, it wasn't the day I decided to use drugs. It was the day that my mom's boyfriend raped me. And I was like, whoa. And suddenly, they weren't all telling me their stories, but they were all saying exactly the same thing. It's like, yeah, I'm dealing with something. And that's the day I started learning about trauma-informed therapy, trying to help somebody understand their why. And it turns out that in the criminal context, you can do the same thing with people that are willing to. Try to understand their why, especially young men. So we're about to open the Glen Mills School in a trial pilot basis in my district to try to get young men in there to understand their why for criminal behavior and see if they can't change the trajectory of their life through their own choices rather than imprisonment. And if they are willing to do that, then we can find some compassion.
Let's pivot to talking about some economic and business issues. We don't always think about the Attorney General from an economic and business climate perspective, but we have seen Attorney Generals impact the economy. Unfortunately, we've seen it by AGs in the past can take more of a combative and punitive approach to employers. How do you view the Attorney General's role in the economy, in business, climate issues, and interacting with employers? Mr. Sunday, we'll start with you.
So to start with, if you want to be an activist Attorney General, then that's the path for you to become a Democrat governor. And that's not something that I think anyone here wants to ever see with their Attorney General. My philosophy is being fair and just. And so from my years of working, not only through the Navy, but through working all those years at UPS, I discovered that one of the most powerful forces that exist is that of capitalism. And to the point where I have seen people that have come out of prison that have been on probation, parole, work release, you name it. And I have worked side by side with them in some of the hardest jobs you could possibly do. And I've seen their lives change. Because what happens is when they recognize that they have the power within themselves to change their lives, that's one of the most powerful forces that you could ever imagine. And so when it comes to being an Attorney General and to having the ability to impact the community through the business environment, we must take a hands-off approach. We must stand back and speak with all of the different individuals that are involved with the different issues that come up, to talk to them, to identify what their actual issues are, and to view the way that we approach these issues through the lens of collaboration for the betterment of our society, and not always through the lens of what can I do to get you. One of the worst things that I have seen over the last 5 to 10 years with regard to being a chief law enforcement officer is the fact that in other places around this country, people have stopped investigating crimes and they have started investigating people. And that can never, ever be the case. That can never happen. And as Attorney General, and speaking to you through the lens of someone who has been the twice elected chief law enforcement officer in a large county directly north of Baltimore, I can tell you that that philosophy is the philosophy that Pennsylvania needs, and it is the philosophy that I will bring to the role of Attorney General.
Mr. Williams, the AG's role in economic and business issues.
Yeah, so the question is about the economy and business impact in the Attorney General's office, and of course that's in the civil division. Let me give you just a few examples, and I've touched on one already. You can absolutely open the door for economic opportunity in Pennsylvania if you did one thing today, and that's to get out of the way of the energy sector. We are sitting on a virtual energy gold mine right here in Pennsylvania, and one thing has locked it down, and that is progressive policies that say you're not allowed to pull that natural resource out of the ground. You're not allowed to get it down to the southeast of Pennsylvania, where we would benefit from both refining and transporting either overseas to other places in the United States. And that is because of, as Dave correctly said, a progressive policy that started in the Attorney General's office with the current governor, going after energy companies in the Southeast for building pipelines, filing criminal cases against energy companies. You've got the Biden administration unilaterally shutting down energy development in Pennsylvania by way of the EPA. The Attorney General absolutely has a role to play in that. This is not a hands-off moment. This is somebody stepping into that role in day one, understanding the issues, having litigated in those issues already, and taking the governor to task in the Commonwealth Court immediately, leveling the playing field for us, making sure that our economy in Pennsylvania is unlocked. And it's not just there, right? It's the National Transportation Safety Board, which came into Pennsylvania and said that it wanted to take over certain investigations. We have a stake in the outcome of those investigations, and they cannot lock down the Pennsylvania Utilities Commission from doing their investigation and telling us the right answers. I don't trust the Biden administration to tell me what happened. I don't trust the Biden administration to go out and file a lawsuit against wrongdoers. That's the Attorney General's job, not Joe Biden's. So yeah, there's a huge role to play for the Attorney General in our economy.
Gentlemen, you're not only running to be the Republican nominee for Attorney General, you're also running to be a statewide leader in the Republican Party. Some say party is fractured beyond repair. Others, and I'll paraphrase Mark Twain, say reports of the party's demise are greatly exaggerated. What say you, in about a minute, how do you bring together the Republican Party to win statewide office? Mr. Sunday?
Well, I'd like to start with the fact that the left clearly wants nothing more than for us to be divided. All you need to do is look on social media, look at the news at night, look at your local papers. It is beyond evident that their sole purpose is to keep us divided. And ask yourself, why is it that they want that? Why do they want to keep us divided? You better believe it. It's because they want us to lose. The most important thing to them is that we lose. And the worst thing that they could ever imagine is that we come together as a team. And we work together as a team, because I'm going to tell you right now, when you work together as a team, anything can be done. Anything can be done. And to that point, I have traveled throughout the entirety of the Commonwealth. I have been campaigning for Attorney General very, very hard. And I have spoken to people from all walks of life. And I'm going to tell you right now, what I've discovered is that Republicans and conservatives are ready to win. And there are so much more that keeps us together than could ever tear us apart. I'm going to tell you right now, when we stop listening to them on social media, when we stop listening to them on the news at night, and we start looking at each other, and we start working together as a team, the worst thing that will happen ever to the Democrats will be the best thing for us. And that's going to be that we are going to win this November.
So in about a minute and a half, uniting the Republican Party, Representative Williams.
We're sitting on a precipice as a party in Pennsylvania. Sitting on a precipice. I know we say this all the time about this is the most important election of our lifetime. We are sitting here right now at a moment where the Republican Party in Pennsylvania is about to become irrelevant if we don't start winning some elections. We're about to become one of those blue states that presidential elections write off. Colorado used to be deeply red, now it's deeply blue. And we are sitting right there, but for one thing, which is getting this party back on track. Getting this party back on track. And that's going to require an additional thing. I've traveled the state too. I've traveled the state talking to all manner of Republicans. And what they're tired of is a handful of people inside of our party picking candidates instead of them. Instead of them. And they are ready right now to be done with the handful of people who are doing the picking and start doing the picking themselves by way of a change of leadership, by way of a change of modality. And you know who figured this out first? Donald Trump. When he said, when he got inside the swamp and saw it from the inside, and I'm now seeing it from the inside, the whole thing's broken. It's a few people making the decisions for all of us, and they're not making great decisions. It's time for a new day. We will reunite, but we've got to change first.
30-second final thoughts. We'll start with Mr. Sunday.
Do you feel safer now than you did 5 years ago? Do you? Do you feel safer than you felt 10 years ago? The answer is no. And that is the absolute most important question to be asked today. As a father of a son who's in third grade, who's been a prosecutor for a long time in courtrooms, who has fought the Latin Kings, who has been fighting the opioid epidemic for as long as I can imagine, okay, who has fought child predators, who has fought scammers, I can tell you I am deathly afraid of the world that my son's going to grow up in, and I'm going to do everything in my power within the 30 seconds I have to tell you that I'm going to fight to keep our community safe. It is the number one most important thing.
He ran out the
That's
clock.
it.
30 seconds. Representative Williams,
that's it.
30 seconds.
I'm a retired Marine Corps colonel, nearly 30 years in the service, a combat veteran, a federal prosecutor, a state representative. I've been legal counsel to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. There are 7 candidates in this field, and nobody can touch my experience. I step into the job on day one, ready to fight criminals, ready to fight in the civil arena, and ready to fight for you, senior consumers. I'm Craig Williams, and I'm asking for your vote.
Please join me in thanking the candidates for Attorney General of Pennsylvania.